Now this might look like your everyday vertical Smith machine, but this machine has a trick up its sleeve. You pull out these pop pins. Welcome to the third dimension. This is the Bodycraft Jones Freedom Machine, which is a 3D Smith machine. Believe it or not, 3D Smith machines have actually been around for a while. Most commonly available as commercial models, although personally, I've never actually seen one in a commercial gym. My curiosity got piqued when I saw RitFit teasing their upcoming all-in-one that also featured a 3D Smith machine as part of that all-in-one rack. When I saw a deal for this machine pop up on Marketplace, I couldn't pass it up, so I went and picked it up. The mechanism is not super complex. With this design, basically there's another set of guide rods that runs here along the floor, and the machine housing slides on them. This machine also has the ability to lock the horizontal plane in place. That just makes the machine work like a regular vertical Smith machine. So you get the benefit of having both types of machines in one. So what are the benefits of a 3D Smith machine versus a regular one? Unlike with a traditional Smith machine, obviously you have the horizontal plane of motion, so it can be a little bit easier on your joints as the bar can travel a more natural path with your body rather than you conforming to the machine. Especially if you're a beginner and don't have your movements dialed in, it can be pretty hard on your joints. Your setup also has to be very exact with the machine for where you position your bench or your stance for various exercises. Whereas when the bar can move horizontally, it's easier to set up, but you still have all of the convenience and safety features of a Smith machine because the spotters move with you. It's easy to set the safeties, and it's easy to rack and unrack whenever you want. How do exercises feel on it compared to either a free weight or a traditional Smith machine? First, let's talk a bit about bench pressing. What I like about it is, again, it's easy to set up. I don't have to have millimeter to millimeter accuracy when I set up my bench under the machine. It's easy to rack and unrack. The movement itself, it does take some getting used to. It is quite a bit different from a regular Smith machine, again, because you do have that freedom of motion horizontally. There is a bit of a weird momentum to the movement when you move horizontally. And sometimes that really feels like it can throw you off balance if you're not used to it. But I think with some muscle memory, that's something you can probably get used to. And it's kind of a middle ground between free weight and a Smith machine. That being said, I don't really like it as much as doing my pressing movements with a free weight barbell. So it can work, but it's not my favorite. It's a similar story when it comes to squats. It feels kind of like a middle ground between a barbell squat and a Smith squat. You still get some additional stability because it's still fixed side to side, but it can move forward and back. So again, you don't have to get your stance as exact, and the bar does move with you. That being said, you do now have to focus on being balanced front to back. And due to some muscle memory of just doing Smith squats, when I was in the hole a couple of times, I almost felt myself falling backwards because I'm just used to pushing up and not worrying about balance. And in this case, again, since it can go back, definitely was a bit jarring getting used to doing squats in this thing at first. And same as with bench, it does have a bit of this momentum if it's moving horizontally. So you really have to learn to compensate for this momentum. I still prefer doing the standard Smith squats and lock the horizontal plane in place when doing squats. And if I wanted to do more traditional squats, I'd rather just use a barbell than use this. Again, it does add some safety and convenience, but the movement was just a little weird for me, and I'm not quite sure where it fits in my program. Now, where this machine really shines are the more dynamic movements like lunges and reverse step downs. I'm able to use the full range of the machine, and I don't really have to worry about balance as much. Those sorts of movements are really this machine's bread and butter. There were a few issues you got to be careful when doing those movements. For example, sometimes I did find myself going too far and then bumping up against the range of motion of the machine, which can be a bit jarring, especially when you're loaded up with heavy weights there. So that's just something you have to be mindful of. Now, the other thing that brings up is you really need a machine with a good amount of horizontal travel for that. So when I look at the RitFit machine that's coming out, which only seems to have 9 or so inches of horizontal motion, I'm not really sure where that's really gonna pay off, because the exercises where I think this machine really shines, you couldn't really do in that all-in-one type of a setup. Bent over rows on the machine felt pretty good. I think that's another exercise that you could execute with this machine, and it does feel a little bit better than just doing it on a fixed Smith machine, if that's your jam. I did try bicep curls on it, and that didn't really work out because you want to rotate the bar, and then that just kept engaging the locking mechanisms of the machine when trying to do curls on it. So don't really recommend that. What about movements like deadlifts and RDLs? Yeah, you could technically do them. One of the issues here is in the starting height is a little bit on the tall side. So you really need to set up some kind of a plyo box or a platform in order to get an appropriate range of motion for RDLs or deadlifts. Or you could opt to remove these springs if you don't really drop the weight. I wouldn't recommend it, because at the end of the day, all that weight is still resting on top of these linear bearings. So I wouldn't feel comfortable dropping the weight on this particular machine, because I'd be too concerned about damaging the bearings in the mechanism. And what about hip thrusts? That's another exercise that I think with some setup, this machine does really well. Again, the main issue is the starting height due to these springs. If I'm just doing the hip thrust with the bench and off the floor, I found that there wasn't really enough range of motion, which I think is a common issue that you see with a lot of Smith machines for exercises like hip thrusts. I tried a few variants, one where I've just tried to raise my feet on top of a couple of plyo boxes. That definitely made the exercise better. And then when I raised both my feet as well as my back by using my Hyper Pro GHD pad as my back support rather than a standard bench, then the exercise felt really good. Obviously, that requires some setup. Again, it's one of those things where you could take off the springs and make that safety trade-off in order to get more range of motion, which I think would make this much better for hip thrusts. It does feel really good when you have appropriate range of motion. Something I would even consider if I didn't have a dedicated hip thrust machine already is getting some kind of a hip thrust platform, maybe like the Booty Sprout, and putting it inside of this Smith machine in order to do that exercise. In fact, there are planing machines on like Alibaba and other places you see that are specifically hip thrust machines that use this type of a 3D Smith machine setup for that exercise. So there's definitely something to this machine design for hip thrusts. So I'm actually considering modding my hip thrust machine further, taking the pendulum off entirely and just putting it inside of this 3D Smith machine to have a really awesome hip thrust machine. Obviously, there would be some trade-offs, as it would block being able to do other exercises in this machine. So make sure to drop me a comment if you have ideas about other exercises you want me to try in this machine. Now that we've covered a bit about how to use the machine, let's talk about some of the details about this specific machine. I have done a bit of research about 3D Smith machines that are available for residential use, and turns out there's not that many options. So Bodycraft, which is the company that makes this one, seems to be the leader in this space, and they have a range of models, with this one being their entry-level model, which is targeted more for the residential and home gym space. Now, the MSRP on this machine is $1,800, which I think is a bit steep. There's definitely a lot of cost-saving design choices that are evident. For example, this hook style uses cutouts in the upright to engage the Smith machine, which is something you typically see on more budget models. The weight sleeves are plastic and not metal, and the maximum capacity of this machine is 500 pounds. Other obvious cost-saving design choice here is that this machine doesn't have a full cage design. The horizontal guide rods go along the floor, and then you also have these braces that are running along the floor in the front to back to give the machine some rigidity. This design can be a bit annoying because these brackets can get in the way when you're doing your exercises or trying to set up your benches or plyo boxes and such. The other trade-off is, the machine is a bit more wobbly than your typical Smith machine, and it doesn't really bother me that much during use, but that's just one of the trade-offs that was made for this machine. As far as the actual barbell, the knurling is extremely passive, almost to the point where it's non-existent, and there is no center knurl. So that can make the barbell a bit slippery, especially for movements like squats. A lot of the time for movements like squats or any other movement where I put the barbell on my back, I end up using a pad around the bar, not necessarily for comfort, but just to give me some more traction and feel more secure that the bar isn't gonna slip off. I do like that the safeties are pretty well designed. They're very easy to use. You can just flip them around. There's this little notch that you can grab by, and it's very easy to set the height very quickly for where you want your safeties to be. And the numbers that tell you the number of the notch are all on the inside, so it's easy to see where you have your safeties or where you have your Smith machine engaged, so you can keep track of that for different exercises. Is a 3D Smith machine right for you? If you have the space in your home gym and you're going to be getting a dedicated Smith machine, then if you have the option to get a 3D Smith machine, then why wouldn't you? Because it can serve both as a regular fixed Smith machine and add a lot more options by being a 3D Smith machine. That being said, there are not a lot of options for home gym buyers to get one of these. I got lucky because I saw someone selling one on Facebook Marketplace. And again, if you were to try to get a new one, either you have to look for one of these Bodycraft ones or a used commercial one, which are pretty rare. You can also find some models on Alibaba, which again, if you really want to get one, may be your best path to get one. As far as something like the upcoming RitFit one, I'm not really sure that having a 3D Smith machine integrated into an all-in-one rack is that useful, just because of the limited range of motion horizontally that design seems to offer. Because where this machine really shines are those dynamic movements where you really want to have, at least 3 feet of motion in a horizontal plane. And RitFit's design really just seems kind of like a gimmick to me. So I'm not really sure what the value there is going to be, but that machine's not out yet, so I'll withhold my judgment until people provide some feedback on it. Hopefully you found this review and deep dive into this 3D Smith machine interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not yet subscribed, and check out this video for a full tour of my home gym if you haven't seen that yet. And don't forget to drop me a comment if you have any questions about this machine or any other pieces in my gym. And I'll see you in the next video.